Okay, they want the answer in two different ways. They want it in volume of the cylinder in terms of pi and to the nearest tenth. So in order to find the volume of the cylinder, what you're doing is you are finding the area of the circle, and the area of the circle formula is pi times the radius squared, and we always need to do that times the height to find the volume. Okay, so I'll put in big H here. Okay, and that will equal our volume. So what do we know? We got to fill in all the values that we know. We said pi, we keep it in terms of pi right now. Pi times the radius is 6 times 6 squared times the height of 8. And if I was really being proper, I'd write in the units. Now, keeping it in terms of pi means that we're going to do 6 times 6, which is 36, times 8. Okay? And I don't know what that's going to be, so I'm going to write it down on the bottom. We can write 36 times 8. 8 times 6 is 48. Eight times 3 is 24, plus 4 is 28, 288. And what didn't we use in there? What we didn't use is the pi. We didn't multiply by pi. We just did 6 times 6 times 8. So 288 pi inches cubed. Okay, which is roughly equivalent to, and what I want you to do now is, instead of me doing this, because I don't have a calculator in front of me, and it's kind of late, so I'm trying to get these to you. So what I want you to do is I want you to multiply 288 times, and then hit your pi button on the calculator, round to the nearest tenth. Rounding to the nearest tenth means you're going to keep the digit, well, you're going to have one more digit after the decimal. You always look to the one after that, see if it's 5 or higher. If it is, that counts as more than another half of a tenth. And so we would say, okay, let's bump up the number of tenths by 1 to count for that extra more than half of another one, that all the parts that follow it. Okay, so either it's going to round up to the next place in the tenth place, one higher, or it's going to stay the same before you drop off all the other digits. So I'm going to let you do that yourself, and that answer's in the book somewhere. It's got each, but if it's 288 pi inches cubed for the in terms of pi, then you're good. Okay, so I'm going to box this one off, and for the next one, you're going to fill in the blanks by multiplying. Okay, I'll move on to the next. All right, we'll do the same thing here, which is the volume is equal to area of the base, pi times the radius squared, times the height. And, excuse me, if we look at this, we can see that the cylinder is sitting on its side, not on its base. So what are we going to do about that? Well, we're just going to calculate the area of the base. So we say volume equals pi times the radius, and they didn't give us the radius, they give us the diameter. The diameter is 4. The radius is always half, and it's from the center to the edge, not all the way through the center from one edge to the other. So the radius is 2. So we say that times 2 squared times the height, which is 10. Okay? And so we get 2 squared is 4. 4 times 10 is 40. So we get 40 pi centimeters cubed. And the last little bit for you, the last task for you, is to just type into your calculator, what is 40 times pi? And that'll give you some decimal number, round it to the nearest tenths, And that'll be the second of the two answers. Okay? So do a couple more. Okay. Cool thing about this is even though it is oblique, it is slanted. This is an oblique cylinder, not a right cylinder. It's not forming right angles. We're always going to use the right angle height to be the height, and then it'll work out the same. It has a height of 6. That means if we were somehow able to push it over and maintain the same height, we would be just stacking that into a right cylinder and it would still have the same volume. So this doesn't change the fact of how you do it. You still do the volume is equal to pi times the radius squared times the height. And the height, what we're talking about, is the vertical height, the one that forms 90-degree angles with the base. So this vertical height of 6. So we say, okay, then the volume is equal to pi times, and now if the diameter is 5, then the radius is 2.5. So we would say 2.5 squared times the height of 6. Okay? Now I happen to know that 2.5 squared is 6.25, so I have times 6.25 times 6. And, oops. Okay, so let's do our little trick with pi for a second. I'm going to take half of 6 to get 3, and I'm going to double 6.25 to get 12.5. Of course, that's all times pi. So I'm going to say then that's equal to 3 times 12.5 is 37.5. Pi, and the units are meters cubed. For your purposes, you're going to do the rest yourself, which is to convert this into a decimal number to the nearest tenth, which is to take the pi button, hit pi, and then multiply that by 37.5 and round it off to the nearest tenth. Okay, one more slide on this video. Okay, one more here. The diameter of the cylinder is 1 yard, so if we have a cylinder that looks like this, okay, then if the entire diameter going straight through the middle, let's say there's the middle, if the whole diameter is 1 yard, then half of that is 0.5 yards. Okay, 0.5 yards. And that's the radius. That's halfway through. Okay, so then when we're doing the formula for volume of a cylinder, which is the volume is equal to pi times the radius squared times the height. We got pi times, what did they say the radius is? Well, they said that the diameter is 1 yard, so it's 0.5 of a yard. Squared times h, the height of this thing, says is 4 yards, and I didn't fill that in, but it's 4 yards. So height times 4. So we've got pi times 0.5 times 0.5 is 0.25. Times 4, and this will be a nice one because 4 times 0.25 is 1.0, or simply 1 as the coefficient on, well, as the multiplier of pi. 0.25 times 4 is 1, 1 times pi is pi, so the volume of this is exactly pi units. And what are they? They are yards cubed. And that's not exact, that's in terms of pi. If you want it exact, and I'll do this one because I can do this one in my head, the volume is then approximately equal to, and what is pi as a value? It is 3.14. And of course, we're rounding to the nearest tenth, so we look here, is that 5 or higher? No, it's not. So this drops off without raising the 1 up any. And then you get the volume is okay, sorry. That rounds, if there's a 1 in the tenths place and there's only a 4 in the hundredths place, then it rounds to approximately, to the nearest tenth, 3.1. And then we have to determine what is the units. The units is yards cubed. Great, we're done.